And Ethan finally just shared his resume.
I am very confident in the team that we have here at the Emergency Operations Center. We're fully staffed and ready to go. And I want to reassure people who are concerned about folks here in Anchorage that we are on top of this situation.
I was downtown at the APD headquarters building, and the 911 center is at Elmore, and I had felt the earthquake here at headquarters, and I knew it was a fairly big earthquake. I've lived in Anchorage for a long time, and I was like, well, it's a pretty good sized earthquake. Our building here was still standing, but I had no idea what the status at Elmore was. So I immediately turned on my portable radio, communicated with dispatch via radio. I was like, hey, are you guys still there? Are the phones still ringing? And they said everything was fine. And so then we started working our way through other things, but that was the number one priority for me. As long as the 911 center is still able to receive phone calls from the public. If that's not happening, we have to fix that as soon as possible.
The power looks like it's out in good chunks of downtown. Is everything 10-2 and dispatch? Everything appears to be 10-2.
My office is on the second story of headquarters. We're on a building on stilts on 4th Avenue. Geology was my major in college. So I understand what happens to the ground when there's a long earthquake. So I'm sitting at my desk and the earthquake starts and it keeps going and it keeps going, and I'm back in my mind is, we're on 4th Avenue. What happened last time on 4th Avenue? The ground liquefied and we had a great big huge chunk fell off. I was just waiting for the ground in front of, on the other side of 4th Avenue and down A Street, I was waiting for all of that to liquefy, and in my mind, I was thinking, I'm just gonna watch the building collapse and we're just gonna write it right down and I'm gonna end up on the AC couplet. When the shaking stopped and we were still standing and we'd lost some pictures and some things had fallen, and it hit us so hard that we knew that that was going to impact the rest of the community. When the power cut off, our emergency generator did not activate, and that caused all kinds of problems. So our dispatchers had to punt. We had to leave dispatchers in place and a wrecked dispatch because, of course, Station 12, where dispatch is located, was trashed. My very first thing that I thought of was, we have to get resources out. We have to make sure that we didn't lose any fire stations, and we have to make sure that the public is okay.
I was driving to work when the earthquake happened, so I didn't even really realize that there was an earthquake until I got to City Hall and saw people streaming out of the building. And then I pulled my phone out of my pocket to see the earthquake alert and the tsunami alert. And so I just got out of my car and walked over to the Emergency Operations Center and walked in and said, what can I do?
There was stuff coming down from the ceilings. I mean, it was definitely felt like a major event that could have taken out bridges from where I sat. I was definitely sure we were going to the Emergency Operations Center. I didn't even need to get notification of that. I assumed we had a serious and major event.
The fire chief and I got there at about the same time. I did have to go lights and sirens just because everybody that works or lives downtown, it seems like, was on the road. So it was pretty gridlocked for a little bit.
I had a kind of unique earthquake experience in that I experienced the earthquake outside. I had just dropped off my 3-year-old son in Anchorage Montessori School. The earth started moving and the cars started shaking and the sound got really loud. But as a result of being outside, I think for me it was somewhat less traumatizing. I went back inside to the school and everyone was sort of shell-shocked and under tables, and Kids were screaming.
And immediately our board started blowing up with calls, structure fire calls, building collapse calls, those kind of incidents were coming in.
From the police chief's and the fire chief's vantage point, just seeing the call volumes explode, they knew it was a bigger deal. Very quickly, I think the earthquake's at 8:29, I think something like 8:40 or so, we've already activated the Emergency Operations Center and we're sort of putting the whole apparatus in place. So that involves putting out the all-call for all the Emergency Operations Center personnel to arrive, and then putting everything into a structure.
The nature of an earthquake is such that fire is going to have a very large role in urban search and rescue or other life-saving events, but law enforcement is going to have a role as well. There were a lot of transportation infrastructure issues that it's critical for us to be involved in. Obviously, we want to maintain public safety, maintain the public's feeling of safety, so it made sense to us to have that joint command and work together on the various aspects that our two agencies could focus on. Other people from our agency started arriving as well, so I started getting support staff there almost immediately, and then other government agencies started arriving.
So the Municipality of Anchorage is the size of Delaware. It runs from the Kinnick River all the way down to the Kenai Peninsula Borough. And we have assets all over the place. So the police department, the fire department, the street system, buses are out there, planes are flying over Merrill Field. But we're only part of the story. In relatively short order, I think we did get a handle on what the impact to the utility system had been and to figure out which of the major infrastructure pieces we were still keeping a close eye on. We didn't know the status of the port for a long time, for instance. We had a ship that was unloading fuel that we pulled off of the dock, and then we had to do a lot of pressure testing and really weren't sure of how functional the port was going to be.
The first thing was actually making sure that people knew exactly what they needed to do in that moment. And we wouldn't have a lot of information about what was actually happening around the city for a little while. And I knew it would be an all hands on deck kind of several days. So I led communications, put together the communications team for the response, and really worked on trying to get the public information out as quickly as possible so people would know what was happening. One of the things that was important is having everybody in that EOC, having seats for the water utility, for the electric utility, for the school district, for the Red Cross, for all of these partners, so that we could talk to one another and make sure that the single point of contact was, you know, the NIXL alerts, the media briefings, all of those things. It was coming through one point of contact.
So the first day we got there and we were really doing kind of immediate emergency, making sure there wasn't mass casualty, if there was a need to stand up alternative care sites at the hospitals, making sure the hospitals were stabilized and had what they needed. We kind of got through the day, prioritized then after that shelter, seniors.
We were very fortunate that the earthquake happened at the time that it did. It happened on a day where we didn't have a big storm. So November 30th could have been a very terrible weather-wise day, and it was not. It happened at 8:30, which is shift change for Anchorage Fire Department. So fortunately, we had already had an oncoming shift showing up to work the next day, and the offgoing shift had not left. So we were double staffed.
We have a patrol shift that starts at 7 a.m. and we have one that ends at 9 a.m. So it was during the overlap, so 2 patrol shifts were on duty. It was also a weekday, so we had a lot of additional units available, like school resource officers, detectives, traffic units. One of the first things that I did after sort of checking that our critical infrastructure was still functional was notify the patrol supervisors and commanders that mid-shift would be staying and not going home until we had a little bit better understanding of exactly what we were facing. We immediately had the ability to put a lot of extra police officers out in the community, frankly, just because of the timing of the event. It also gave us time to shift into sort of our emergency footing, which is taking the entire police department to 12-hour shifts with no days off. And so half the department is on duty at any given time. With regards to Chugach and Eagle River, there really was some additional impacts out there. One of our lieutenants lives in that area, felt the earthquake, and because he was already in the area, he sort of reported for duty over the radio, and I tasked him with organizing the APD activities on the ground in Chugach Eagle River. So that was very common throughout the event, that people just sort of popped up and made themselves available to work.
So while the first press conference is underway and the mayor and the chiefs are giving everyone some comfort that there is a group of people who are now assigned to figure out what's going on and to make forward progress, We were racking up what we wanted to keep an eye on and what we thought were the major things that needed to be corrected.
For those of us who are parents or who have pets, it was very clear that while we did not have an event that had caused mass casualty or mass injury, we had major emotional stress and distress at home. So I got home and my kids, nobody would leave our bedroom. We all slept together in the same room. Nobody wanted to not be together.
I think we'd all learned about 1964 and we thought of it as a big earthquake. I don't think anyone had ever left us with the impression that after a big earthquake there is at least a week and a half of just additional terrifying nonstop earthquakes. And I think sort of personally, we were all really feeling that.
I think everybody had had that same collective experience, and we recognized that it was time to really focus in on the fact that this was an event that's going to require a lot of emotional support. Everyone was affected by it emotionally. I don't know anybody that didn't feel a little stressed out every time there was an aftershock. So we made a decision to do some communication related to that.
We added on the second day an update about mental health and people who were experiencing crisis and could call a phone number and how they could talk to their children. Not because there was a playbook that told us to do that, but because we too were experiencing the dozens of aftershocks and realizing that this was not a comfortable experience for anybody.
And we also addressed pets. Like, we didn't even think about it at the very beginning, but pets were super freaked out. And how do we deal with our pets in situations like this? And the other thing is, in stressful situations, it's important for you to not lose sight of your humanness.
And I think we found some places where we could have some fun. Once we had food, I think people relaxed a little bit.
What became important for us was to have a little levity in the situation. And we saw that was true with the Anchorage community. And the memes that were popping up on social media were hilarious and wonderful. And so that made us realize that our community was kind of hungry for that too.
Our mission in the public communications was to do what we would want if we were on the other side of the television.
We all had some of the same issues that everybody else had. Our houses were shaken up and we all had things to deal with at our homes. But our families all knew that we had duties to the community that needed to be fulfilled. And so our families all stepped up as well and took care of problems at home to make sure that we could take care of problems in the community or ensure that no problems arose in the community. I think this is another prime example of families stepping up to support their first responders. I mean, it's absolutely critical to our mission to have good family support.
After about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when we realized that we didn't have any major collapses, we didn't have any running fires that were taking out blocks of town, we didn't have any significant injuries, and all the road collapses had kind of stabilized, then we were able to stop for a second and now move into recovery mode. What do we need to do to get the city back working so that people could be back to work? The fact that we were already working on recovery 6 hours after the initial quake, that's just phenomenal. Back to, there's lots of things we can credit to that. Great people, great timing, and the fact that we have good building codes and good other systems in place that allowed us to survive so well.
I mean, honestly, that's what you want, right? Yeah. Like some big thing happens and the community looks at it and goes, oh, well, everybody just did what they're supposed to do and we're good. Not like, wow, we need years and years of inquiries to figure out why that went so horribly wrong.
When we got the opportunity through social media and the regular media to talk to people and ask them to go check on their neighbors, to take it easy and don't try to do too much, to look out for their mental health. And here's resources that we can provide. Everyone took that so serious and really did what we asked them to do. That was I was absolutely proud to be a member of this community and to, be the fire chief.
We were, I think, acutely aware that the community was counting on us and that we were it. I mean, we had to fix it or it wasn't going to get fixed.
The community came together like I've never seen before, and no one asked anything other than, how can I help you?
I've heard people say we got lucky, and I don't think we got lucky. I think we have really committed municipal employees who are smart. We've got great first responders, the police and the fire, and everyone was just working their best. So I think even if it had been a more high damage event, we still would have risen to the occasion.
I have to say, probably the biggest takeaway is that Alaska is still Alaska, and when something like that happens, Alaskans stand up and just take care of business.
When that earthquake hit, we sort of got the initial reports of how strong it was. It gave us a clear indication that things could have been really bad. And when we did the damage assessments and understood that people were, for the most part, very safe and that the damage was only to property or primarily to property, we felt incredible relief. But as mayor, I was just incredibly proud of the team around me and how people responded. I was incredibly proud of how the community responded. It was calm, it was measured, and one of the reasons why I love living in Alaska is because when we act like Alaskans, there is no place on earth that compares to this, and we acted like Alaskans that day. This is a strong, great community, and I am so lucky to live here.